Ambassador Husam will have remarks to make.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Ramadan Mubarak and Ramadan Kareem to all of you, my brothers and sisters, distinguished guests and friends, and I see many friends in this beautiful place, I have to say, very impressive. But it is indeed an honor to be speaking to you today. Before I start, allow me to thank Rizwana Hamid for her wonderful work in putting this event together, and with her Miqdad Varsi and the team here at the Center for Media Monitoring for all that you do, my friends. This very important, timely task of actually monitoring the media. And the media, especially mainstream media in this country, has been faulty of not reporting the situation in Palestine and in the region in the way that it should. The thanks also goes, of course, to the Muslim Council of Britain, and I have my friend and brother, Dr. Wajid, with us here, the chairperson of MCB. I'm grateful for the opportunity to address an issue that not only affects the Palestinian people, but also the integrity of journalism and our shared values for fairness, truth, and justice. First, some context, my friends. The kind you will rarely hear on mainstream media. For over a century, the Palestinian people have faced profound hardship and oppression. From the cancelling of our peoplehood, our nationhood, cancelling of the Palestinian people inherent in the 1917 Balfour Declaration, and what followed of the British mandate of Palestine 2 years later in 1919, through the ethnic cleansing of Palestine in 1948, which left 2/3 of our people displaced from our homes and land, becoming refugees in our own homeland like Gaza and the West Bank, but also scattered around neighboring countries like Jordan, like Lebanon, Syria. And then what followed was the military occupation in 1967 and the apartheid system of Israeli rule that came with it. To 15 months of genocide and genocidal aggression in Gaza, starting in October 2023, that we are now seeing being replicated in the West Bank. And I've just returned from the West Bank. Our history has been a history of struggle for our rights, for human dignity, and for justice. Specifically, we have been denied three fundamental rights. First, our right to self-determination. Second, our right to return to our homes. Third, our right to be treated equally. These are natural rights, my friends, enshrined in international law and international human rights law, and should apply to everyone. They should not be asked for. Inalienable rights, birthrights. And yet, despite this history of struggle, despite its grounding in international law and human rights, despite the support of the entire world, including the UK, for Palestinian statehood, despite an Oslo peace process that was meant to be concluded in 1999 already, and was reinforced by the 2002 Arab Peace Initiative, we are nowhere near. In fact, Israel is more determined than ever in words and deeds to obstruct any possibility of Palestinian self-determination, let alone the right of Palestinian refugees to return to their homes. While Israel redeployed from Gaza in 2005, it implemented a blockade of the coastal territory that was so tight that Israel could literally count calories to allow just enough food through for people to survive. Israel denied Gaza the ability to fix its power station, which Israel had bombed earlier, or fix water systems and sewage networks, or trade without restrictions with the outside world, even through countries, third countries like Egypt. And Israel kept control over land, air, and sea space. You know all that, I know. But it is important to put the context. That siege not only undermined any attempt at self-sufficiency for Gaza, it allowed Israel to easily choke off the territory after October 2023, blocking the delivery of humanitarian aid, medicine, food, water, along with electricity and fuel to Gaza's 2.3 million people. In the West Bank, meanwhile, Israel has plugged ahead with its settlement expansion, colonial settlement expansion, strangling any hope for economic growth or normal life. I told you I just came back. More than 900 checkpoints, roadblocks. Entire towns and villages are totally sealed off, disconnected. Depopulating whole areas in Jenin, in Tulkarem. 40,000 have been already displaced. What is happening in the West Bank is horrific. The only difference is there is no such attention, particularly in the international media. While still in the West Bank, shaping an apartheid system of rule that sees Israel settlers enjoy more rights. Actually, the only segment of people who live in the West Bank, of course illegally, are the settlers who enjoy rights. The Palestinians who live in their own land enjoy no rights whatsoever. The Palestinians live under martial law in the West Bank, while Israeli illegal settlers are subjected to Israeli civil law. Today, with its aggression on the northern West Bank, Israel has, as I just said, displaced 40,000 to add to the 1.9 million it has already displaced in Gaza over the last year and a half. The vast majority of those have nowhere to return, my friends, with some 2/3 of Gaza's housing stock damaged or destroyed. Let me just point out that settlements under international law are considered war crimes. That's the definition of illegal settlements. It is a war crime. The indiscriminate bombing of civilian areas, carpet bombing, as former US President Joe Biden described Israel's bombardment, carpet bombing is a war crime. The denial of food, water, electricity, and fuel to a civilian population is a war crime. Indeed, Israel's occupation, as per the International Court of Justice, is unlawful and must end in the shortest possible time. These are the words of the highest court of the globe. So, my distinguished guests, you would know very little of this if you were confined to consuming mainstream British media. There is barely nothing of by way of context when it comes to coverage of Palestine. There is barely nothing by way of context when it comes to coverage of Palestine. When the BBC decided to describe the health ministry in Gaza as the Hamas health ministry, this was justified as providing context. Right? Why not preface every mention of Israel's occupation with the word unlawful. This is not me saying, or you saying, this is the International Court of Justice saying. Why doesn't the BBC or the Sky, all that we have, start with saying the Israeli unlawful occupation? Why not preface every mention of Israel's settlements as or with war crime? Or Israel's military as occupying military? Aren't they occupying military? Isn't there a global consensus on these terms? Isn't this the UK policy actually? And law? Why not report when talking about Netanyahu that he is wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes and crimes against humanity? I bet you if there was any other international foreign leader who is wanted by the ICC, the BBC or any other mainstream would say X who is wanted by. If you want to talk context here. Why not clearly assert that the blockade on humanitarian aid is simply a war crime? It's a crime against humanity. To starve children for political ends, to use food as a weapon of war is a crime against humanity. To present Israel's genocidal assault on Gaza as war, as if two standing armies are facing off against each other is a deeply distorted description of the reality. Indeed, the whole two-sidism approach to reporting on Palestine misleadingly underplays the imbalance of power between Palestinians and Israelis. Israel, a nuclear armed state with one of the most powerful militaries in the world, occupies a territory with a people who are subjected to constant oppression, violence, and systematic discrimination. How do you draw symmetry here? How do you say war between two sides? What qualifies these terminologies? What law? What background? What reference? To present it in a way, or to present it in any other way is going to be very imprecise. Because, this isn't a war. This is an aggression against, by and large, civilians. And look at the numbers. Look at the numbers. More than 70% of those who were murdered in Gaza are women and children. Now the 30% doesn't mean anything because there are so many innocent men. The fathers and the brothers and the sisters. But, my friends, it does not reflect reality. The way media report does not reflect reality. It's imprecise and it is irresponsible. So to present it in any other way is imprecise, it does not reflect reality, and it is irresponsible. But is this what we learn from the mainstream media? Do we learn that Israel has targeted hospitals and schools, destroyed every university in Gaza? Every single university, 100%. That Israel has imposed a famine? That the main victims of Israel war of extermination are women and children? Where are the profiles of these Palestinian victims? Do you know the names of all these victims, or at least some of them? Or Palestinians are just numbers, statistics? Palestinian suffering is regularly downplayed, and I know that will come out in your report. Our suffering, our pain is always downplayed, or worse, erased. When Palestinian civilians are killed or wounded in Israeli airstrikes, we hear of casualties rather than victims. And that's why I was among many a year and a half ago when I was asked about, do you condemn? And when I was asked about the 7th of October, I said, okay, we're happy to talk, and we should talk. And of course, we are all against killing civilians or targeting civilians. That's our DNA. But where were you on the 6th of October when the UN declared that that was the deadliest year for Palestinian children, not in Gaza, in the West Bank? By Israeli occupation forces, of course. Where were you? Why didn't you bring us to the studios? Why didn't you bring Israeli officials to the studios and ask them to condemn what their government and what the army is doing? You see the double standards. You see the hypocrisy. You see the selectivity. And when they interview Palestinian officials, it's almost like an interrogation rather than an interview. They interrogate us. You have to come clean. You have to prove yourself. You are guilty unless proven innocent. Starting point. That's why the condemnation is, there is an obsession about it. Because the assumption is you're guilty. You're the extremist. You're the violent. You're the aggressor. You're the provoker. We hear a lot about Israeli hostages, but very little about Palestinian detainees, which mainstream media tend to refer to as prisoners, Palestinian prisoners. I'm sure all of you read this, hear this, prisoners. And prisoners give you the impression that those are a bunch of criminals. Right? It's meant, it's deliberate. When in fact the whole world, and go back to all the reports, the majority of Palestinians in Israeli prisons are rounded without charge, without any due process. Some of them are children. And those who have gone through a process, gone through some sort of a military court. And by the way, the conviction rate in the military courts is 99%. Can you imagine? 99%. And then the BBC still calls them prisoners? When Israel rounds hundreds of our people under administrative detention, which means that they're not charged, they have no lawyers, no courts, no nothing, just rounded in prisons and stay there for as long as the military authorities wishes to. They renew it every 6 months. You call that a prisoner? Shouldn't you really think of a different term to reflect the truth? And not only are people in Israeli jails, are detained, are captives, are also hostages to the Israeli military system and military courts. But Palestinian detainees, according to the UN, and the UN Commission released its report only a few days ago, are suffering sexual abuse in detentions so severe, my brothers and sisters, so severe that, and I quote, the report says, it is more than a human can bear. We have seen videos of Palestinian detainees being gang raped, and I'm sure some of you have seen these videos. Gang raped inside Israeli prisons. Do we learn this from mainstream media? Is it reported the way it should be? Is it investigated? Do they do their job? I want to read the report. Are we ever reminded that the reason international journalists are not reporting from Gaza is because, like food, water, and medicine, Israel is not allowing journalists into Gaza? Shouldn't we every morning start when we talk about Gaza that until the 470 day, the BBC or the Sky or this and that are still blocked and deprived or denied access to Gaza? Shouldn't that be the headline every time? At least to provide pressure? Nothing. Oh, we are not in Gaza. Why aren't you in Gaza? Because Israel doesn't allow it. Why don't you say it? And say it every day, every morning, every evening, in every bulletin. At least maybe that will create a pressure if you are serious about your own profession. Should this not be made clear in every report on the situation? Should this not feature prominently when reporters in Jerusalem or Ramallah or even here in London file their stories? And where is the skepticism over Israeli claims? How could several mainstream newspapers lead with a splash front page on beheaded babies without even attempting to check such baseless allegations? Of course, sometimes reality seeps through. Most recently, we saw one of the rare instances where Palestinians are humanized. In the recent documentary showing Gaza through the eyes of children who live there, How to Survive a War Zone. Remember that documentary? How to Survive a War Zone. Children. To then see the BBC, it was broadcasted on BBC. To then, that was recently, a couple of weeks ago. To then see the BBC board pull that documentary and apologize for significant and damaging mistake is really infuriating for me as a Palestinian. Infuriating. But frankly, embarrassing for the entire industry. Embarrassing for the entire industry. Because the father of one of the children in that film was a part of the Gaza agriculture ministry. Really? That was the reason why they pulled it out. Is the child not still a child? A child. What this has to do with his father? That's the BBC. So, my friends, it is rather remarkable that despite this endemic bias, British public opinion is so solidly sympathetic to the Palestinian plight. So solidly. The public opinion has shifted hugely, massively. So public opinion has been vociferous enough that it compelled the government to take some steps, serious steps, including limited sanctions on settlers and settler organizations and partial arms embargo. Imagine what might be the case absent bias. With the bias, still the majority of the British people are with the truth, with rights, with the plight of the people, with justice and fairness. Imagine if this bias was not there. What could happen? In every opinion poll, the majority, 80% and above of the British people say yes to recognizing the state of Palestine, yes to arms embargo, yes to sanctions against the illegality, yes to establishing a state of Palestine, and yes to accountability. They want to see the ICC ruling enforced. That's the vast majority of the British people, by the way, from all backgrounds, cross-community. All this with the bias. And therefore, my friends, the Palestinian people have long called for a media narrative that reflects the truth of our struggle. We are not asking for sympathy, my friends. We are not asking for sympathy. We are asking for fairness, for professionalism, and for accuracy. That's all what we're asking for. We are asking that the media report on the realities of our situation, free from the bias that has long colored the portrayal of Palestinians as extremist and maximalist. If anything, with the current Israeli government, the Netanyahu-Smotrich government, which includes out and out racial supremacists, the opposite is the case. If you want to talk about who is maximalist and who is extremist, you need not to look further than the current Israeli government. It means acknowledging the legitimacy of our struggle for freedom, justice, and equality. Journalists, regardless of where they are in the world, have a moral duty to report the truth. This truth is not always easy to convey. It requires courage, nuance, and an understanding of the complex history of our region. It also requires a commitment to human dignity, to seeing Palestinians not as numbers or political pawns, but as human beings whose lives have been ravaged by decades of abuse and an unjust and illegal occupation. And if reporting on Palestine has always been biased against us, at least since October 2023, it has been abject. And this is not just a problem for us, my friends. It is a problem for the legitimacy of mainstream media. It is a problem for the integrity of journalism.